Picture this: a fragile, bark paper book, painted in brilliant colors, its pages whispering secrets from a civilization long gone. The Aztec Codices are more than just ancient manuscripts. They're time capsules, filled with mysteries that have survived against all odds. Imagine holding one in your hands, tracing the glyphs that tell stories of gods, wars, and rituals lost to time. But here's the shocking truth: nearly all of these priceless records were burned by Spanish conquerors, erased in their attempt to dismantle an empire. Only a handful survived, hidden away like treasures, and within them, 30 astonishing secrets waiting to be uncovered. These codices aren't just historical artifacts, they're puzzles, each symbol a piece of a bigger picture. Think of them as the Aztec version of a history book, but written in a language of images so vivid they leap off the page. They reveal everything from royal bloodlines to celestial prophecies, from medicinal herbs to gruesome sacrifices. And yet, so much remains shrouded in mystery. Who were the scribes who painted these pages? How did they encode their knowledge in ways that still baffle scholars today? And what lost truths might still be lurking in the margins, overlooked for centuries? That's exactly what we're diving into today. Because hidden within these surviving codices are clues that rewrite what we thought we knew about the Aztecs, their beliefs, their triumphs, even their darkest moments. Some of these secrets are so startling they challenge modern interpretations of history. Others are so personal they feel like eavesdropping on a conversation from 500 years ago. So if you're ready to step into the world of ancient scribes and unravel the enigmas they left behind, you're in for a journey like no other. This is more than history, it's a detective story, and every page holds a new revelation. Let's begin. The first secret hidden within the Aztec Codices isn't just a calendar, it's a living, breathing map of time itself. Imagine a system so precise it could track the movement of planets, predict eclipses, and even dictate the fate of empires. The Aztecs didn't just measure days, they wove time into a sacred tapestry where every cycle held meaning. At the heart of this system was the Tonalpohualli, the 260-day sacred calendar, interlocking with the 365-day solar year like gears in a celestial machine. But here's what's truly mind-blowing. This wasn't just for planting crops or marking holidays. Priests believed these cycles revealed the will of the gods, offering glimpses into wars, droughts, and even the rise and fall of rulers. Take the Codex Borgia, one of the most stunning surviving manuscripts. Its pages are alive with intricate symbols, jaguars, serpents, and flaming stars, each representing a day or a deity's influence. One section shows the Tonalpohualli laid out like a spiral, with each day governed by a different force. A day ruled by Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent, might bring creativity, while one under Tezcatlipoca, the god of night, could signal danger. And the accuracy, modern scholars have found these calculations line up with actual astronomical events, sometimes down to the hour. How did they achieve this without telescopes or advanced mathematics? That's the mystery that still baffles historians, but the calendar's power went beyond predictions. It was a tool of control. Emperors and priests used it to justify wars, crown kings, and even schedule sacrifices. A bad day could delay a battle or doom a ruler. In the Codex Mendoza, there's a haunting scene where a king's coronation is timed precisely to a lucky alignment, proof that time wasn't just measured, it was manipulated. Yet buried in these same pages are quieter secrets, farmers' almanacs marking the best days to plant maize, or healers noting when certain herbs were most potent. For all its grandeur, this was also a calendar of everyday life, etched into bark paper by scribes who understood time as both a cosmic force and a deeply personal guide. What's chilling is how much was nearly lost. When Spanish missionaries burned the codices, they weren't just destroying books, they were trying to erase a way of seeing the world. Today, fragments of this knowledge survive like scattered puzzle pieces. Some days in the Tonopah still can't be fully decoded, their meanings whispered only in half-understood glyphs. But every so often, a researcher discovers something new, a correlation between an ancient date and a historical event, or a forgotten ritual tied to a celestial alignment. The calendar isn't just a relic, it's a key waiting to turn in the lock of history. The next secret hidden in the Aztec Codices isn't just a ritual, it's a covenant written in blood, a pact between mortals and the divine. At the center of it all stood Huitzilopochtli, the hummingbird god of war, whose thirst for battle was matched only by his hunger for sacrifice. The codices paint a vivid picture: warriors with obsidian blades, priests in feathered regalia, and the eerie glow of temple fires casting long shadows. But this wasn't mere violence for its own sake. Every drop of blood spilled was a thread in the fabric of the universe, a payment to keep the sun rising and the world from collapsing into chaos. Take the Codex Bourbonicus, where a single page captures the terrifying grandeur of these ceremonies. A warrior dressed as the god himself stands atop a pyramid, his chest bared as he holds a razor-sharp teapottle knife. The glyphs swirling around him tell the story. This wasn't just death, it was transformation. The Aztecs believed blood was Chalchihuatl, sacred liquid, the same substance that fueled the gods during creation. Without it, Huitzilopochtli would grow weak, the sun would stall, and darkness would swallow the earth. The codices show how every rank of society participated, from kings piercing their tongues to commoners offering drops from their ears. Even children gave blood during festivals, their fingers pricked with magi spines. This wasn't cruelty, it was duty woven into the very rhythm of life. But the most chilling detail, the precision. The Codex Magliubkiano reveals how priests timed sacrifices to celestial events, aligning them with the movements of Venus or the solstices. A victim's heart might be torn out at the exact moment the sun reached its zenith, their life force channeled into the cosmos like a divine battery, and the aftermath. The body wasn't discarded, it was ritualized. Some codices show flayed skins worn by priests, symbolizing rebirth, while skulls were stacked into tz'ampantli, racks that served as grim ledgers of devotion. Yet hidden in these same pages are quieter truths, prayers whispered to comfort the chosen, or glyphs marking the names of those who volunteered, seeking honor for their families in death. What's often overlooked is the duality of these acts. The Florentine Codex, compiled after the Spanish conquest, records Aztec elders describing sacrifice as both terror and transcendence. To die for Huitzilopochtli was to become Ixiptla, a god's living image walking the line between mortal and divine. Modern scholars debate whether victims went willingly or were coerced, but the codices suggest something more complex, a society that saw beauty in the brutal, meaning in the macabre. Today, these pages force us to confront uncomfortable questions. How do we judge a worldview so alien to our own? And what happens when we reduce these rituals to mere barbarism, erasing the cosmology that gave them purpose? The answers might lie in the very symbols we've yet to fully decipher, the silent strokes of paint on bark paper still waiting to speak. Deep in the pages of the Aztec Codices lies a whisper of a place so legendary, it blurs the line between myth and memory, the Lost City of Aztlan. Described as an island surrounded by reeds, bathed in the golden light of dawn, it was said to be the cradle of the Aztec people before their great migration south. But here's where the mystery thickens. No two codices describe it exactly the same way. The Codex Boturini shows a group leaving Aztlan led by their god Huitzilopochtli, their journey marked by footprints winding through the pages like a sacred map. Yet the Codex Orban paints it as a paradisiacal land of herons and springs, a far cry from the stone cities the Aztecs would later build. So why does this homeland remain one of history's most elusive puzzles? Some scholars argue Aztlan was a real place, its location deliberately obscured to protect its sanctity. Clues scattered across multiple codices point north, perhaps to the deserts of modern-day Mexico or even as far as the American Southwest. One theory suggests it was near Lake Mexcalteton, an island settlement whose layout eerily matches descriptions of Aztlan's circular canals. Others believe it's buried beneath what's now Mexcalteton streets, waiting for a shovelful of earth to reveal its secrets. But there's a haunting counter-argument. What if Aztlan was never a physical city at all? The Florentine Codex hints that it might have been a metaphor, a spiritual birthplace rather than a stone and mortar one, a concept as fluid as the reeds that supposedly surrounded it. The truth might lie in the Aztecs' own understanding of history. For them, time wasn't linear but cyclical, with cities rising and falling like the breath of the gods. Aztlan could have been both a memory and a prophecy, a place they came from and one they might return to in a future age. This duality makes the search even more tantalizing. Modern expeditions using LiDAR technology and spectral imaging have scoured potential sites, but the land refuses to give up its secrets. Maybe the answer isn't in the ground but in the codices themselves, hidden in glyphs we've yet to decode. What's certain is how deeply Aztlan shaped the Aztec identity. Emperors invoked its name to legitimize their rule, claiming direct descent from its original inhabitants. Poets wove its legend into epics, and priests used its imagery in rituals, tying the present to an almost dreamlike past. Even today, the search for Aztlan isn't just about geography. It's about understanding how a people saw themselves, their origins wrapped in layers of myth, politics, and faith. Every stroke of paint in these ancient books is a breadcrumb leading us backward through time. But will they ever bring us home? Among the most chilling secrets preserved in the Aztec codices are the pages that seem, at first glance, to celebrate the beauty of nature until you look closer. Hidden between vibrant illustrations of blossoms and vines are plants with a far deadlier purpose. This wasn't just a botanical catalogue, it was a poisoner's handbook detailing flora so potent they could silence an enemy with a single petal or tip an entire battle in the Aztecs' favor. The Codex Cruz Badianus, one of the few surviving medical manuscripts, holds eerie proof. Delicate paintings of herbs with deceptively pretty flowers, their roots and leaves laced with toxins known only to elite healers and assassins. Take the Tezcatlipoca, a plant depicted with crimson blooms in the Codex Florentino. Priests revered it for rituals, using tiny doses to induce visions, but in the wrong hands. A pinch of its seeds could paralyze a man's lungs before he drew another breath. Warriors were said to coat darts with its extract, turning rain-soaked battles into silent massacres where enemies collapsed without a wound. Even more insidious was the Michihuatl, a milky sapped vine illustrated in the Codex Mendoza. Steeped into a noble's drinking chocolate, it left no trace, mimicking a sudden illness. The codices don't just describe these plants, they encode their preparation, from grinding techniques to antidotes, suggesting a society that walked a razor's edge between medicine and murder. But the true genius lay in how the Aztecs disguised their deadly arsenal. The Codex Borbonicus shows gardens where lethal and healing plants grew side by side, their differences known only to trained eyes. A conqueror might admire a bed of fragrant Yautli flowers, never realizing they were breathing in pollen that, when mixed with certain resins, induced hallucinations or slow paralysis. Some scholars believe these gardens doubled as living weapons, diplomatic gifts sent to rival cities, their beauty masking a slow-acting curse. What's most unsettling is how these practices blurred the line between sacred and sinister. The Codex Magliebkiano reveals that the same poisons used in assassinations also played roles in rituals. Victims destined for sacrifice were sometimes given Tezcatlipoca, a paste of toxic herbs, to numb pain or induce euphoria before their hearts were offered to the gods. Even in death, plants dictated fate, a duality that forces us to rethink how we label good or evil in the ancient world. Today, researchers still debate whether some of these species exist undiscovered in Mexico's jungles, their secrets rotting in the soil alongside the empires that wielded them. The codices whisper their names, but the earth keeps its silence. Hidden among the most enigmatic symbols in the Aztec codices is an object that seems to defy logic, a mirror that doesn't reflect the face but the future. Tezcatlipoca's smoking mirror appears again and again, wreathed in dark mist, its surface a swirling void. This wasn't just a divine accessory, it was a conduit to the unseen, a tool of kings and seers who dared to gaze into its depths. The Codex Borgia shows the god Tezcatlipoca himself holding it, 1 foot replaced by the mirror, a reminder that even deities paid a price for its power. But what made this artifact so feared and so coveted that rulers would risk everything to wield it? Legends etched into the Florentine Codex tell of emperors kneeling before the mirror in secret chambers, its obsidian surface clouded with prophetic smoke. Nezahualcoyotl, the poet king of Texcoco, was said to have consulted it before major battles, watching as shadows within the glass revealed enemy strategies or looming betrayals. The mirror didn't just show events, it twisted them, playing tricks on the viewer's mind. Some accounts describe advisors driven mad after staring too long, their sanity unraveled by visions of alternate futures. Yet for those strong enough to interpret its riddles, it offered unmatched advantage. The Codex Mendoza hints that Moctezuma II kept a smaller version hidden in his staff, a portable oracle disguised as a ruler's scepter. But the true secret lies in the mirror's physical form. Recent studies suggest these weren't just mystical symbols. They were real objects polished from volcanic glass so pure it formed a black, translucent pane. Obsidian mirrors found at Aztec sites match descriptions down to the finest detail, their surfaces still faintly iridescent after centuries, even more startling. Chemical analysis reveals some were sourced from quarries hundreds of miles away, proof of a sprawling trade network that treated obsidian as both weapon and sacred medium. The Codex Fejeverimea maps these routes, showing merchants carrying mirrors wrapped in jaguar pelts, their cargo guarded like state secrets. What's rarely discussed is how the mirror's duality shaped Aztec leadership. To consult Tezcatlipoca's mirror was to embrace ambiguity, a lesson in power where every truth came veiled in smoke. Modern theorists argue these rituals weren't just superstition but psychological theater. A king who claimed the mirror's guidance could justify impossible decisions, his authority amplified by the divine unknown. Yet the codices also warn of its cost. Tezcatlipoca, the god behind the glass, was a trickster. His gifts always carried a shadow, and those who relied on them too heavily often found their reigns cut short by rebellion or ruin. Perhaps that's why so few mirrors survive today. Broken or buried, they remain as elusive as the visions they once held, whispers of a time when power wasn't just taken, but reflected. Beneath the shadow of towering temples and bustling marketplaces, the Aztecs faced an impossible challenge: how to feed a city of 200,000 on an island surrounded by lake. The answer wasn't just ingenious, it defied the very limits of nature itself. The floating gardens of Xochimilco, depicted in vivid detail across multiple codices, were more than farmland. They were living rafts of soil, bobbing on water, yielding harvests so abundant they stunned the Spanish conquerors who first saw them. The Codex Mendoza captures their magic: rectangular plots tethered to the lakebed with willow roots, each one a self-renewing ecosystem where maize grew taller, beans climbed faster, and fish darted between the roots, fertilizing crops with their waste. This wasn't just agriculture, it was alchemy. The secret lay in the chinampas, a system so advanced modern permaculturists still study it today. The Codex Vergara breaks it down like a how-to manual: layers of lake sediment, woven reeds, and decaying vegetation piled onto rafts, creating soil so rich it could yield 7 harvests a year, triple what conventional fields produced. Workers poled canoes between the plots, pruning plants or adding nutrient-rich China-metal mud scooped from the lake bottom, but the real stroke of genius. Water itself was the engine. Capillary action kept roots hydrated without irrigation, while the canals between plots regulated temperature, shielding tender sprouts from frost. The Florentine Codex even notes how flowers like marigolds were planted as natural pest deterrents, a pesticide-free solution centuries ahead of its time. What's often overlooked is how these gardens doubled as political tools. The Codex Asuna reveals that emperors gifted chinampas to loyal nobles, turning agriculture into a currency of power. A single plot could feed a family for generations, making them more valuable than gold. Yet the system had a dark edge. During droughts, water levels dropped, exposing the gardens to raids from rival cities. The Codex Orbin records a year when Tenochtitlan's crops failed and hunger bred rebellion, proving even this marvel had vulnerabilities. Today, fragments of Xochimilco's labyrinth survive. Their tangled canals now are an UNESCO site where tourists glide past remnants of the original plots. But the codices hint at lost knowledge, formulas for soil blends, planting calendars tied to lunar cycles, even rituals to bless each harvest. Researchers recently discovered traces of ancient mycorrhizal fungi in chinampa soil samples, microscopic allies that supercharged plant growth. It's a reminder that the Aztecs didn't just conquer nature, they conversed with it, listening to whispers we're only now beginning to hear. Hidden in the darkest corners of the Aztec codices lies a secret curriculum, a training manual so grueling it turned ordinary men into the empire's most feared weapons. The jaguar warriors weren't just soldiers, they were living embodiments of the jungle's deadliest predator, forged through rituals that blurred the line between human and beast. The Codex Mendoza pulls back the curtain on their initiation, showing recruits dragged into a world of pain, hallucinogens, and psychological warfare that would make even modern special forces hesitate. It began with the Cuacale, the Eagle House, a temple so sacred. Its entrance was shaped like a jaguar's gaping maw. Inside, aspirants faced trials designed to break the body and awaken the spirit. One page from the Codex Borgia depicts a young warrior bound to a post for days, his skin painted black to absorb the sun's scorching rage while priests circled him, chanting spells to summon his inner beast. Another shows initiates forced to scale cliffs blindfolded, their fingers bloodied by obsidian shards embedded in the rock, a test of trust in both the gods and their own instincts. But physical endurance was just the first layer. The Florentine Codex reveals the true crucible, the Taiolia or soul journey. Candidates ingested ololuqui, a psychedelic morning glory brew that catapulted them into visions of the spirit world. Here they battled shadow jaguars, navigated labyrinths of fire, and sometimes, if the codices are to be believed, merged with the god Tezcatlipoca himself, emerging with golden eyes that gleamed in the dark. Modern commandos undergo survival training, but none are expected to literally lose their humanity and reclaim it in a single night. The parallels to elite military units are eerie. Like Navy SEAL facing Hell Week, Jaguar warriors endured sleep deprivation, exposure, and simulated drownings in ritual lakes. But where SEAL earn a trident pin, Aztec initiates received something far more permanent: fangs. The Codex Magliebkiano shows priests filing recruits' teeth into jagged points, a brutal cosmetic change that marked them as predators forever. Even their weapons were extensions of this identity, macuahuitl clubs studded with obsidian blades designed to mimic a jaguar's claws. What's often overlooked is the psychological warfare behind the training. The Codex Bourbonicus illustrates a final test where initiates were unleashed in a mock battle against veteran warriors, except the enemies were their own brothers and childhood friends. To pass, they had to fight without hesitation, proving loyalty to the state outweighed personal bonds. It's a chilling precursor to modern programs like the Spartans' Agoj or Russian Spetsnaz hazing, where emotional detachment is weaponized. Yet for all its brutality, the system worked. Spanish accounts describe jaguar warriors charging into gunfire without flinching, their spotted armor making them seem like a living avalanche of teeth and muscle. The codices suggest their greatest strength wasn't just skill, but belief. They didn't think they were like jaguars, they became them. That transformation, painted in vivid glyphs 500 years ago, remains one of history's most extreme case studies in the psychology of warfare. And somewhere in these pages, between the blood-stained rituals and sacred vows, lies a question we still grapple with today. How much of a soldier's power comes from training, and how much from the unshakable conviction that there's something more than human? The most haunting pages of the Aztec Codices aren't drenched in blood or gold, they're filled with stars. Tucked between celestial charts and ritual calendars lies what some scholars call the Obsidian Prophecy, a series of omens so precise they seem to predict the Spanish conquest years before the first ship appeared on the horizon. The Florentine Codex records 8 terrifying signs: a column of fire splitting the night sky, a temple struck by lightning, even a weeping woman whose wails echoed through Tenochtitlan's canals. But were these just myths spun after the fact, or did Moctezuma's priests truly read the future in the alignment of planets? One page in the Codex Telleriano-Remensis holds a clue, a chart showing Venus, the war star, locked in a rare conjunction with Mars on a date that corresponds to 1511, the year Cortés landed. To the Aztecs, this wasn't just astronomy, it was a divine billboard. Their sacred Tonalpohualli calendar assigned each day to a god, and the alignment fell under the rule of Tezcatlipoca, the fire deity associated with endings and renewal. The same codex describes priests gathering in secret, debating whether this celestial collision heralded the return of Quetzalcoatl, the pale-skinned god-king who'd vowed to reclaim his throne. Yet the real controversy lies in Moctezuma's response. The Codex Mendoza depicts him receiving reports of floating mountains, Spanish ships off the coast, his face a mask of dread. Some historians argue he hesitated because the prophecies had primed him for doom, interpreting every Spanish advance as fate. Others cite less mystical reasons, political infighting, or the fact that Aztec spies had already intercepted messages about the newcomer's brutality. The Codex Aubin even hints at a faction within the court urging preemptive strikes, overruled by Moctezuma's fatalism. What's often overlooked is how these prophecies functioned as political tools. The Florentine Codex notes that astrologers who warned of invasion were initially dismissed as alarmists, only to be heralded as sages after the fact. In a culture where omens were wielded like weapons, predicting disaster could be a power play, a way for priestly factions to undermine rivals or justify purges. Modern astronomers have run simulations confirming that some of the described celestial events did occur, but their interpretations remain as contested as the codices themselves. Perhaps the most chilling detail is buried in the Codex Borgia, a single glyph showing an obsidian mirror cracking, a symbol the Aztecs associated with shattered destinies. It's dated to the year Reed 1, the exact moment Cortés marched into Tenochtitlan. Coincidence or proof that somewhere, someone had pieced together the unthinkable long before the swords fell? The truth might lie in the way the Aztecs saw time not as a straight line but a spiral where history repeats in echoes. If so, their greatest prophecy wasn't about the Spanish at all, but about the inevitability of cycles. Empires rise, empires burn, and the stars watch indifferent. Buried deep within the Aztec codices, between sacred hymns and battle strategies, lie maps that don't lead to cities or temples, they point to treasure. Not just any treasure, but the legendary gold of the gods, hoards so vast they were said to glow with their own light. The Codex Boccherini shows cryptic symbols marking mountain caves and lakebed vaults, while the Codex Mendoza lists tribute payments in ingots shaped like animals. Each one vanished without a trace after the Spanish arrival. But here's the twist, these weren't just royal coffers. The Aztecs believed gold was Tezcatlipoca, divine excrement, a metal so sacred it pulsed with the energy of the sun itself. And according to the codices, most of it was never found. Take the Codex Orban, which describes Moctezuma's final act of defiance as Cortes closed in on Tenochtitlan. With the city burning, the emperor ordered his servants to dump the empire's most precious relics into Lake Texcoco: golden jaguars, feathered scepters, even a life-sized sun disk studded with gems. Spanish soldiers later dredged the shallows, recovering a fraction of what was lost, but the codices insist the bulk of it still lies buried in the mud, waiting. Modern sonar scans have picked up metallic anomalies deep under the lakebed, matching the descriptions of submerged ceremonial barges loaded with tribute. Yet every attempt to excavate has been met with bizarre setbacks, equipment failures, sudden storms, even divers reporting an eerie feeling of being watched. Locals whisper that the gold is cursed, guarded by the ghosts of priests who swore to protect it with their dying breaths. But the real frenzy surrounds the codices' more enigmatic clues. The Codex Fedjevrimea includes a map of the Valley of Mexico, with a single temple marked by a golden serpent, except no such temple exists in known records. Treasure hunters have spent decades scouring the hills, convinced it's a coded reference to a hidden royal tomb. In 1982, a farmer plowing his field near Teotihuacan struck something solid. A stone box containing 22 gold bars, their weights perfectly matching the Aztec Quetzalcoatl measure. The discovery ignited a gold rush, with Codex scholars racing to decipher other symbols that might lead to the motherlode. What few realize is how these hunts have reshaped history. The Florentine Codex recounts how Spanish torturers pressed Aztec nobles for gold's whereabouts, leaving behind fragments of confessions scribbled in the margins of stolen codices. One page, now in the Vatican archives, bears a smeared glyph that might read, "Beneath the red water," a possible reference to the blood-colored springs near Popocatépetl volcano. In 2016, a team using LiDAR found unnatural tunnels beneath the area, their walls etched with Aztec numerals, but entering them proved deadly. The shafts flooded with scalding mineral water the moment they were breached, as if the earth itself was rejecting intruders. The cruel irony, much of the gold the Spanish did capture never made it back to Europe. Ships like the Nostra Señora del Juncal, laden with looted artifacts, sank in hurricanes, their wreckages still missing. Today, the codices' maps are as disputed as ever, part history, part treasure hunt, part warning. Because for all the technology we've thrown at the search, the gods' gold remains stubbornly out of reach, hidden not just by earth and water, but by centuries of myth and longing. Maybe that's the point. After all, what's a treasure without a mystery? Among the most mesmerizing and unsettling secrets hidden in the Aztec codices are the creatures that aren't animals at all. They're humans caught mid-transformation, their limbs elongating into jaguar paws, their faces warping into beaks, their skin rippling with feathers or scales. These aren't just artistic flourishes, they're glimpses of the Nahual shapeshifters who straddled the boundary between the human and animal worlds. The Codex Borgia reveals one such figure in terrifying detail. A priest mid-ritual, his mouth distended into a serpent's maw, while glyphs swirl around him like a recipe for metamorphosis. But here's where it gets even stranger. This wasn't mere folklore. For the Aztecs, shapeshifting was a sacred science, a discipline taught in secret schools and practiced by elite warriors, healers, and spies. The key to understanding Nahualism lies in the codices' most cryptic illustrations. The Florentine Codex describes initiates consuming Tezcatlipoca and ololuqui hallucinogenic plants that unlock the animal within. Under their influence, subjects reported feeling their bones crack and reform, their senses sharpening to predator-like intensity. But this wasn't just drug-induced delirium. The Codex Magliebkiano outlines a rigorous training regimen, months spent fasting in caves, chanting to specific animal deities, even wearing the skins of their chosen beasts to invite the spirit in. Most chilling of all, some accounts suggest the transformation wasn't purely spiritual. A passage in the Codex Bourbonicus depicts a warrior's teeth filed into fangs, his fingernails replaced with jaguar claws, permanent body modifications to cement his dual nature. What's often overlooked is how these practices served real-world purposes. Nahualism was espionage perfected. The Codex Mendoza records spies who infiltrated enemy cities as dogs or coyotes, gathering intelligence before slipping back into human form. Healers, meanwhile, channeled owls to navigate the spirit world and diagnose illnesses, their animal alter egos acting as scouts for unseen threats. Even emperors leveraged this power. Moctezuma Roman II was rumored to keep a coterie of Nahul bodyguards, men who could become eagles at will, surveilling the capital from above. But the most haunting legacy of Nahualism survives today. In remote Mexican villages, curanderos still perform rituals straight from the codices, invoking animal spirits to heal or protect. Anthropologists have documented cases where participants, under trance, exhibit uncanny animalistic traits, growling with vocal cords no human should possess, or tracking scents like bloodhounds. Modern science chalks it up to conditioned psychology, but the codices suggest something deeper. A forgotten bridge between biology and belief, where the lines of species weren't just crossed, they were erased. Perhaps that's why the Spanish burned so many of these records, not because they feared magic, but because they recognized a power beyond their control, the ultimate guerrilla tactic, where the enemy could be anyone, anything, even the bird perched innocently on your windowsill. The codices don't just show shapeshifters, they preserve a worldview where identity was fluid, where humanity was just one skin among many. And somewhere in those fading pigments lies a question we've never fully answered. If you stare too long at an animal's eyes, who's really looking back? Imagine a world where your morning cup of hot chocolate could buy a house, pay your taxes, or even bribe a judge. For the Aztecs, cocoa beans weren't just a delicacy, they were hard currency, traded by the sackful and guarded like gold. The Codex Mendoza lays it out plainly. 1 bean bought a ripe tomato, 30 got you a rabbit, and a full 8,000 could purchase an enslaved person. But this wasn't just barter, it was a sophisticated economic system with rules so strict, counterfeiters faced execution. Dive into the Codex Fejaverimea and you'll find something extraordinary: receipts. Detailed records of cocoa payments etched in vivid color, from merchants settling debts to emperors collecting tribute. One page shows a nobleman handing over 42 cloth sacks of beans, each sack containing exactly 24,000 beans as part of a land deal. The precision is staggering. Beans were even stored in state-run warehouses, their counts audited by officials using knotted cords to track inventory. But here's where it gets juicy. Like any valuable currency, cocoa inspired fraud. The Florentine Codex recounts how scammers hollowed out beans, filling them with mud or clay to pass them off as genuine. Others painted inferior beans to mimic the prized Criollo variety, which had a distinctive reddish hue. The Aztecs didn't take this lightly. The Codex Osuna depicts counterfeiters being publicly crushed under stones, their crimes literally pressed into history. Yet the real economic genius lay in cocoa's dual role. While beans circulated as money, they also fueled the elite's most sacred rituals. Emperors drank frothy zocolatl from golden cups during diplomatic meetings, turning trade into theater. A foreign ambassador gifted cocoa was being paid and psychically bonded through shared intoxication, since the drink was laced with mind-altering chili peppers and vanilla. Modern economists see this as one of history's first examples of commodity money, a currency with intrinsic value. Unlike paper bills, cocoa was perishable, which kept inflation in check. But it also created vulnerabilities. The Codex Tezcatlipoca records a crisis when a blight wiped out crops, causing prices to skyrocket. Suddenly, a single turkey cost 3 times its weight in beans, and the empire teetered on collapse. What's often forgotten is how this system outlasted the Aztecs. Spanish colonizers initially mocked cocoa money until they realized its power. By 1550, they'd adopted it for tax collection, even stamping beans with royal seals to prevent forgery. Today, in Mexico's markets, you'll still find vendors counting out cacao nibs for small purchases, a living echo of an economy built on bittersweet currency. The codices don't just record transactions, they reveal a philosophy where value grew on trees and wealth could literally melt in your mouth. Beneath the roar of the crowd and the thunder of rubber balls against stone courts, the Aztec ball game was far more than a sport. It was a deadly drama where victory meant glory and defeat could mean death. The Codex Borgia captures the moment with chilling clarity. 2 teams locked in motion, their limbs straining as a heavy ball arcs toward a stone ring, while bound captives kneel at the sidelines, their fate already sealed. To modern eyes, it seems unthinkable, a game where the stakes were life itself. But for the Aztecs, this was no mere blood sport. The Tezcatlipoca court was a mirror of the cosmos, where every bounce of the ball echoed the movement of the sun, and every sacrifice ensured the world kept turning. The rules of this sacred contest were written in sweat and blood. Players, often elite warriors or nobles, couldn't use their hands. Only hips, elbows, and knees to propel a solid rubber ball weighing up to 9 pounds. The Codex Mendoza shows the aftermath. Winners draped in feather cloaks while the defeated are led away, their bodies destined for the temple. But here's what most misinterpret: losing wasn't always a death sentence. Glyphs in the Florentine Codex reveal a complex hierarchy of outcomes. Captives from enemy cities were almost always sacrificed, their blood offered to the gods. But local teams, their losses might mean tribute payments, enslavement, or merely disgrace. The real horror lay in the symbolism. The ball itself represented the sun's perilous journey through the underworld each night, and the player's struggle mirrored the gods' eternal battle to keep darkness at bay. Scholars still debate whether the victors or the vanquished were sacrificed, a paradox embedded in the codices themselves. The Codex Borbonicus depicts a triumphant captain kneeling before a priest, his chest bared for the knife. Was this the ultimate honor or a twist of fate? The answer might lie in the game's deeper magic. The ball's movement traced the path of stars, and the court's layout mirrored the 4 quadrants of the universe. Scoring through the stone ring was so rare, it was seen as a divine omen, a sign the gods had tipped the scales. Spanish accounts describe Moctezuma II staging games to decide political outcomes, letting the gods choose through the bounce of the ball. What's often overlooked is how this ritual bled into everyday life. The Codex Magliobiano shows children playing with woven balls, learning the sacred geometry of the court before they could walk. Farmers reenacted the game during harvests, believing its energy would nourish crops. Even the rubber itself was mystical, harvested from almond trees. Its elasticity symbolized resurrection. Modern chemists have found Aztec rubber balls retain bounce centuries later, a testament to forgotten techniques. The true legacy of the ball game isn't just in its brutality, but in its duality. A sport that could crown kings or doom them, all while holding the cosmos in balance. Today, echoes of the Tezcatlipoca survive in Mexican Ulama, where players still strike balls with their hips, though the stakes are mercifully lower. But the codices whisper a reminder: every game, then and now, is a wager. The Aztecs just played with the highest stakes imaginable, the very fate of the world. The skies over Tenochtitlan held more than stars, they whispered warnings. Among the most feared celestial events in the Aztec world were eclipses, moments when the sun or moon seemed to be swallowed by shadow. The Codex Telleriano-Romensis records these events with terrifying precision, each eclipse glyph paired with dates that still align with modern astronomical calculations. But what makes these records truly chilling is how they reveal a hidden game of power, one where priest astronomers wielded the cosmos like a weapon. Take the eclipse of 1510, illustrated in the Codex Borgia. A monstrous jaguar devours the sun, its claws raking across the sky. For commoners, this was a dire omen, the mythic beast Tezcatlipoca descending to end the world. But behind temple walls, priests pored over almanacs, cross-referencing the event with their sacred Tonalpohueli calendar. The date fell under the sign Olan, meaning movement, a day associated with upheaval. The Florentine Codex recounts how Emperor Moctezuma used this prophecy to justify a brutal purge of rivals, claiming the gods demanded their blood to restore balance. The calculations behind these omens were staggering. Aztec astronomers tracked eclipse cycles spanning 52 years, their famous calendar round, using observatories like the Temple of Tezcatlipoca in Tenochtitlan. The Codex Vaticanus contains tables so accurate they predict eclipses decades in advance with only a day's margin of error. This wasn't guesswork, it was celestial engineering. Priests knew, for example, that lunar eclipses often recurred 6 months apart, while solar eclipses followed 18-year patterns. Armed with this knowledge, they staged spectacles where miraculous predictions came true on cue, cementing their divine authority. One of their most cunning tricks, selective prophecy. The Codex Auburn describes a solar eclipse in 1496, but only in retrospect. Contemporary records omit it entirely. Historians now suspect priests suppressed warnings about this event because it fell during a delicate political transition. When the sky darkened unexpectedly, they spun it as a surprise test of faith, demanding mass sacrifices to appease the angry sun. The tactic worked. Terrified citizens donated jewelry and food to temples, while dissenting nobles were accused of inviting the disaster. Modern astronomers have reverse-engineered these records, uncovering traces of a sophisticated early warning system. Eclipse paths visible in Central America between 1450 and 1520 match nearly 80% of the Codice's major omen events. The priests didn't just predict darkness, they weaponized it. A well-timed eclipse prophecy could empty rival cities as people fled anticipated doom, or justify invading a neighbor whose impurity supposedly triggered the event. What's rarely acknowledged is how these manipulations backfired. The Codex Mendoza shows that when Cortés arrived in 1519, his landing coincided with a predicted solar eclipse. Moctezuma, conditioned by decades of celestial choreography, assumed this was another priestly scheme until Spanish canons proved otherwise. In the end, the very tools used to control an empire may have hastened its collapse. The codices preserve these eclipses not just as astronomical data, but as cautionary tales. When you claim to speak for the heavens, sometimes the heavens answer in ways you never expected. Deep in the heart of the Aztec codices, painted between battles and gods, are pages that pulse with another kind of power. The secrets of healers who could mend broken bones with jungle vines, halt infections with moldy bread, even ease heartache with blossoms we now call antidepressants. These were the Tictil, the medicine masters whose knowledge was so advanced, Spanish friars burned entire libraries of their work, fearing it as witchcraft. Yet hidden beneath the ashes, fragments survived, and today modern scientists are realizing something astonishing. The Aztecs were pioneering pharmacologists, their remedies centuries ahead of their time. The Codex Cruz Badianus, the oldest surviving herbal manuscript from the Americas, reads like a medical textbook from the future. One page details a poultice made from chicolote, a prickly poppy used to numb pain. That molecular analysis now reveals contains compounds nearly identical to modern lidocaine. Another prescribes cocoxochital, a type of orchid root for wasting sickness. In 2018, researchers found it packed with gallic acid, a proven anti-inflammatory now used to treat tuberculosis. But the real revelation, how systematically these treatments were tested. The Florentine Codex describes clinical trials where healers adjusted dosages based on patient weight, tracked side effects, and even used control groups, a rigor Europe wouldn't adopt for another 300 years. One of their most startling discoveries revolved around zootontli, a reddish mold growing on corn. The codices show healers applying it to wounds, claiming it ate the rot. When scientists replicated the recipe in 2020, they identified a strain of Streptomyces bacteria, the same family that gives us modern antibiotics like streptomycin. But the Aztecs didn't stop there. The Codex de la Cruz Badiano documents how they boosted its potency by fermenting it with agave sap, creating a primitive but effective drug delivery system. What truly unsettles colonial accounts is how these treatments intertwined with spirituality. The Codex Magliebkiano depicts healers singing to plants before harvest, believing their essence grew stronger when gathered under certain moons. Superstition, maybe not. Recent studies show that Yachtli Mexican tarragon harvested during a full moon contains 30% more analgesic compounds. The Aztecs even practiced early psychotherapy. The Florentine Codex describes soul retrievals where patients inhaled pisciatal sacred tobacco laced with ololiuqui seeds, inducing trances to confront trauma, a precursor to modern psychedelic-assisted therapy. The tragedy is how much was lost. When Spanish missionaries torched the Amexcali libraries, they targeted healing knowledge most aggressively. A single note in the Codex Orban laments the burning of Tenochtitlan's central pharmacy, where shelves held remedies for over 3,000 conditions. Today, ethnobotanists race to reconstruct these formulas from scattered Codex pages and oral traditions. Some breakthroughs are already changing medicine. A tea's Ampantli moss extract now fights drug-resistant bacteria, and horizontal seeds are being tested for diabetes treatment. Yet the greatest lesson isn't just in the plants, it's in the perspective. The Aztecs saw illness as imbalance, treating body and spirit as one. Modern labs now confirm what their glyphs suggested. That feverfew lowers blood pressure not just chemically, but by reducing stress hormones when taken ritually. Science is finally catching up to what these painted pages knew all along, that healing is both an art and a dialogue with nature, where even the whispers of 500-year-old scribes still have something to say. The most dangerous prophecy in Aztec history wasn't written in the stars or carved in stone. It lived in the breath of every priest and the dread of every king. The return of Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent god, was more than a myth. It was a ticking clock woven into the empire's DNA. The Codex Telleriano Rimensis spells it out. A pale-skinned deity, exiled long ago, would one day sail back from the east to reclaim his throne. And when Cortés' ships appeared off the coast in 1519, their sails billowing like serpent wings, Moctezuma's court erupted in panic. Was this coincidence? Divine irony, or had the Spanish conquistador stumbled onto the ultimate psychological weapon? Dive into the Florentine Codex, and you'll find the prophecy's roots run deeper than politics. Quetzalcoatl wasn't just any god, he was the creator of humanity, the bringer of maize, the ruler of a golden age before sacrifice and war. His exile was a cosmic tragedy. Tricked into drunkenness by his rival Tezcatlipoca, he'd burned his own palace in shame and fled across the sea, vowing to return in a sea-cattle one-reed year. The Codex Borgia marks these dates like clockwork every 52 years, each cycle stoking fresh anxiety. But 1519 wasn't just another one read. It aligned with Venus's helical rising, a celestial event Quetzalcoatl was said to herald. To the Aztecs, Cortés' arrival wasn't invasion, it was fate unfolding. What's chilling is how Cortés may have weaponized this belief. Spanish accounts describe him landing near Veracruz on April 22nd, the exact date the Codex Vaticanus associated with Quetzalcoatl's rebirth. He wore a helmet adorned with a red plume, mirroring the god's iconic headdress. Even his route to Tenochtitlan retraced the feathered serpent's mythical journey, a detail Moctezuma's spies reportedly flagged in terrified dispatches. The Codex Auburn captures the emperor's paralysis. Rather than crush the invaders at the coast, he sent envoys with gold and finery, as if testing whether this was truly his god or buying time to avert doom. But here's the twist modern historians debate. Did the prophecy cause the Aztec collapse or just accelerate it? The Codex Mendoza shows Moctezuma wasn't blindly superstitious. He had detailed intelligence on Spanish massacres elsewhere. Yet the myth created cracks in his resolve. When Cortés demanded entry to Tenochtitlan, dissident nobles argued resisting him was defying destiny. The Florentine Codex recounts priests scrutinizing the invaders' every move for divine signs. Cortés refusing human flesh, Quetzalcoatl abhorred sacrifice, his men recoiling at blood-soaked temples the god preached peace. Each confirmation eroded Aztec morale. The tragedy is how easily the narrative flipped. After the Spanish sacked Tenochtitlan, surviving scribes revised the prophecy in the Codex Chimalpopoca, painting Quetzalcoatl not as a returning savior but a harbinger of cycles: empires rise, empires fall. Modern scholars note eerie parallels. Cortés' ships arrived the year the Aztec new fire ceremony was due, a ritual meant to prevent cosmic collapse. In the end, the feathered serpent's return may have been less about gods than about a civilization confronting its own fragility, seeing in a stranger's face the reflection of its deepest fears. The codices don't just record a conquest, they preserve a warning about the stories we tell ourselves and how easily they can become traps. Among the war gods and emperors crowding the Aztec codices, there's a figure too often overlooked, a woman with a quill in one hand and a scepter in the other. The Codex Mendoza shatters the myth of an all-male empire with its portrait of Cihuacotl, the Snake Woman, a title held by the empire's second highest ruler. This wasn't just ceremonial. She commanded armies, presided over courts, and even deputized for the emperor during his absences. But her story is no outlier. Flip through the Florentine Codex and you'll find priestesses like the Tezcatlipoca, female scribes whose intricate glyphs weren't mere copies. They were acts of divine creation, painting worlds into existence with every stroke of their brushes. One of the most striking examples hides in the Codex Borbonicus, a royal funeral scene where the mourners aren't just passive onlookers. At the center stands a woman in a jade headdress, her arms raised in command. Scholars now identify her as Atatostli, daughter of Emperor Moctezuma I, who ruled as regent and likely co-governor during the 15th century. Spanish chroniclers later erased her from official histories, but the codices preserve her legacy. Tax reforms credited to her name, military campaigns she endorsed, even her signature glyph woven into tribute records. She wasn't alone. The Codex Telleriano Remensis lists 17 city-states where women held dynastic power, some leading negotiations with Cortés himself. What's revolutionary is how these women wielded spiritual authority. The Codex Magliebkiano reveals the Cihuatateo, deified warrior women who guided fallen soldiers to the afterlife. Their cult wasn't marginal. Temples dedicated to them dotted Tenochtitlan, and priestesses performed rituals believed to influence childbirth, agriculture, even the outcome of wars. One glyph shows a priestess interpreting an eclipse, a role reserved for the most astronomically literate. Another depicts a healer, Tezcatlipoca, whose medical knowledge spanned herbalism, surgery, and spiritual therapy. When the Spanish burned these records, they missed a crucial detail. The Aztecs saw gender as fluid. The Florentine Codex notes that Macuiltenelc, assigned male at birth, could live as women if they embodied the goddess Xochiquetzal's energy, serving as diplomats and artisans. The real tragedy isn't just that these stories were suppressed, it's how their erasure distorts our view of history. Modern reconstructions of Aztec society often paint women as silent weavers or sacrificial victims, but the codices tell a fiercer truth. A page in the Codex Borgia shows a marketplace where women dominate commerce, their stalls piled high with cacao, textiles, and obsidian. The Codex Fedjavrimea depicts noblewomen overseeing tax collection, their seals stamped on cargo manifests. Even warfare had a feminine edge. The Codex Aztec illustrates female warriors defending Tenochtitlan during the Spanish siege, their atlatl darts finding marks as surely as any man. Perhaps the most poignant testament lies in the Codex Cruz Badianus, where a recipe for the Queen's Tonic survives, a blend of chocolate, vanilla, and Damiana leaves meant to steady the hand that rules. It's a whisper across centuries, a reminder that power wasn't just taken by force in the Aztec world. Sometimes it was brewed, written, or negotiated by women whose voices the flames couldn't silence. Beneath the still surface of Mexico's sacred cenotes lies a darkness so profound, even sunlight fears to trespass. These natural sinkholes weren't just water sources to the Aztecs, they were liquid tombs, gateways to the underworld where kings and offerings sank into eternity. The Codex Tudela reveals one such site in chilling detail, a cavernous pool near Tenochtitlan, its edges lined with stone carvings of skeletal gods, its depths littered with golden ornaments, jade masks, and the bones of those who followed royalty into the abyss. Modern divers call this place Chacmul Cenote, but the codices knew it by another name, Tlalocan, the paradise of the rain god where the dead walked as deities. And now, 5 centuries later, archaeologists are diving into these submerged crypts, uncovering treasures that rewrite history and igniting debates about who truly owns the past. The Codex Mendoza holds the key to these underwater necropolises. One page shows a funeral procession winding toward a cenote, attendants carrying a wrapped body alongside sacks of cocoa, quetzal feathers, and a miniature sun disk of pure gold. Glyphs describe how royal remains were weighted with stones, then plunged into the water as gifts to the gods below. But this wasn't mere burial, it was transformation. The Aztecs believed cenotes were veins connecting the living world to Mictlan, the realm of the dead, and that bones deposited there became conduits for divine power. Recent sonar scans of Chacmul confirm the codices' accounts. Over 800 artifacts lie scattered across the cenote floor, including a Tezcatlipoca, a back mirror worn exclusively by emperors, its obsidian surface still glinting beneath silt. Yet every discovery here comes shadowed by controversy. In 2018, a team retrieving a jade-encrusted skull from Cenote Sagrado faced protests from Maya descendants who view these sites as sacred resting places, not dig sites. The Florentine Codex complicates matters further. It records that some sacrificial victims were volunteers, eager to serve as messengers to the gods. Does that justify disturbing their remains? Archaeologists argue these dives preserve history from looters and erosion, but indigenous groups counter that science is just another form of theft, dressed in gloves and goggles. The most haunting finds aren't golden trinkets but human stories. In 2020, divers at Tezcatlipoca cenote uncovered a young woman's skeleton, her wrists bound with woven rope that somehow survived 500 years underwater. Beside her lay a ceramic bowl containing Teotihuacan, the same toxic paste priests used to induce visions before sacrifice. Analysis revealed her teeth were filed into jaguar fangs, a mark of elite status. Was she a noblewoman fulfilling a sacred duty or a political pawn silenced forever? The codices offer no easy answers, only glyphs that whisper of journeys begun but never ended. As technology advances, so do the dilemmas. LiDAR scans now reveal submerged chambers too deep for human divers, their contents visible only as ghostly shapes on screens. Should robots retrieve what lies there, and if they do, will these objects stripped of context, displayed behind glass, still hold the power the Aztecs believed in? The Codex Borgia warns of Tlazolli, spiritual pollution unleashed when sacred balance is disturbed. Perhaps that's why, no matter how many treasures we lift from the dark, the cenotes never feel empty. Something always lingers in those obsidian waters, not just bones and gold, but the weight of choices we're still making about who gets to speak for the dead. For now, the cenotes keep their deepest secrets. The codices map at least 17 royal tombs beneath the Yucatan's waters, but fewer than half have been explored. Each dive feels like trespassing in a cathedral, where every ripple might be a whisper from the past, and sometimes the water itself seems to resist currents shifting suddenly, lights failing, cameras capturing shapes that vanish before focus locks. Science calls it groundwater movement. The Aztecs would have recognized it as something far older, the gods guarding their own. In the silent chambers of Aztec temples, time didn't tick, it bled. Hidden among the codices' most enigmatic pages are illustrations of priests kneeling before razor-sharp blades of obsidian, their skin parted in precise ritual cuts. But these weren't just acts of devotion, they were a form of sacred timekeeping where blood and calendars intertwined. The Codex Borgia reveals the startling connection. Each drop spilled matched a day in the Tonalpohualli, the 260-day ritual calendar, turning human bodies into living almanacs. Obsidian wasn't chosen by accident. The Florentine Codex describes how volcanic glass, with its unnaturally sharp edge, was believed to channel Itzli, the divine essence of sacrifice. When a priest dragged an obsidian lancet across his earlobe or tongue, the resulting blood wasn't just an offering, it was a measurement. The Codex Borbonicus shows glyphs where specific rituals were tied to bloodletting volumes. 5 drops for Venus's rise, 20 for a solstice, a full bowl to avert eclipse disasters. Modern experiments with replica blades confirm the Aztecs' precision. Obsidian scalpels can make cuts so clean, they leave scars matching Codex illustrations down to the millimeter. But the true genius lay in how these acts mirrored Aztec cosmology. The Codex Vaticanus depicts blood swirling into basins shaped like celestial discs, each concentric ripple representing a cycle of creation and destruction. Time wasn't linear to the Aztecs, it was a wheel, and blood was the grease that kept it turning. Every 52 years during the new fire ceremony, nobles bled themselves en masse to renew the cosmos, their collective suffering staving off apocalypse. Archaeologists have found evidence of this practice etched into history literally. Excavations at Templo Mayor uncovered thousands of obsidian blades stored in chronological order, their edges still stained with hemoglobin after centuries. Some bear microscopic notches, likely tally marks tracking ritual frequency. The Codex Magliebkiano even hints at a grisly innovation: bloodletting calendars where captives were sacrificed in sequences mirroring planetary alignments, their deaths marking time on a scale no sundial could match. What's often overlooked is how this system blurred the line between science and spirituality. The Codex Fegevri includes charts correlating blood loss with agricultural cycles, less during planting, more before harvest, suggesting an early understanding of hematology's role in human stamina. Modern researchers note that controlled bloodletting can stimulate endorphins, perhaps explaining why priests describe these acts as euphoric. Yet the darkest secret lies in the obsidian itself. Recent spectrometry proves the Aztecs sourced ritual blades from specific volcanoes, choosing deposits rich in magnetite, a mineral that aligns with Earth's magnetic field. Was this accidental, or did they recognize these blades held a hidden connection to the planet's pulse? The codices offer no clear answer, only silent glyphs of priests holding mirrors and knives, their eyes fixed on a horizon where time and blood flowed as one. When the moon hung heavy over Tenochtitlan and the city's usual clamor faded to silence, a different kind of sound slithered through the streets, the ghostly chants of Melanauxochitl, the sorceress goddess whose name meant grass flower. The Codex Magliebkiano preserves these eerie hymns in vivid detail, their glyphs twisting like smoke across the page, each syllable designed to blur the line between prayer and curse. This wasn't just worship, it was psychological warfare, a sonic weapon wielded by priestesses who understood the power of sound to unnerve, destabilize, and even paralyze. Modern linguists who have reconstructed these chants describe something unsettling, a cadence that mimics the human pulse before slowing to half speed, creating a subconscious dread in listeners. The rituals dedicated to Melanauxicutl unfolded in darkness for a reason. The Florentine Codex describes ceremonies where priestesses, faces painted with ash and crushed fireflies, gathered in moonless courtyards to invoke her. Their chants weren't melodic but dissonant, weaving together high-pitched whistles and guttural growls, a technique ethnomusicologists now recognize as biphonic singing, where a single voice produces two notes simultaneously. The effect was primal, triggering fight or flight responses even in seasoned warriors. One Spanish account from 1521 recounts conquistadors fleeing a night skirmish, convinced the air itself had come alive with devil tongues. But the true genius of these chants lay in their dual purpose. By day, they were healing mantras. The Codex Cruz Badianus includes a hymn to Melanauxicutl for calming the storm inside, likely used to treat anxiety or seizures. The same syllables that could terrify enemies also soothed trauma when sung in a lower register, proving sound's power to cut both ways. What chills modern researchers are the glyphs accompanying these hymns. The Codex Borgia shows Melanauxicutl with her mouth open unnaturally wide, her tongue forked like a serpent's, a visual cue for singers to employ glottal stops, vocal techniques that create abrupt breaks in sound. When replicated today, these stops produce infrasound frequencies below 20 Hz, waves known to induce vertigo or even visions. The Aztecs didn't just sing to their goddess, they weaponized acoustics, turning air into a blade. Perhaps the most haunting legacy of these chants survives in remote Mexican villages, where healers still whisper fragments of Melanauxiciutl's hymns to ward off evil. The words may be garbled by time, but the power remains, proof that some secrets refuse to stay silenced. High above the Valley of Mexico, where the earth itself seems to exhale Popocatépetl, the smoking mountain has been whispering warnings for centuries. The Aztec Codices didn't just depict this active volcano, they treated it as a living oracle, its eruptions and tremors meticulously recorded like pages in a divine diary. The Codex Telleriano-Romensis captures one such event with eerie precision. A plume of ash twisting into the shape of Quetzalcoatl's feathered serpent, dated to the year 2 Reed 1511, exactly when Spanish ships first appeared on the horizon. But this wasn't mere symbolism. Modern volcanologists comparing these records to ice core samples and sediment layers have found something astonishing. The Aztecs weren't just observing eruptions, they were predicting them. The Florentine Codex reveals how priests monitored Popocatépetl, language, subtle changes in the color of smoke, the frequency of ground tremors, even the behavior of animals fleeing the slopes. One passage describes how rabbits and coyotes abandoned the mountain's base days before a major eruption in 1486, a phenomenon modern science now links to pre-eruptive gas releases that irritate wildlife. Another details priests using obsidian mirrors to measure the angle of the volcano's smoke column, interpreting steep plumes as imminent explosions and shallow ones as mere warnings. When researchers cross-referenced these accounts with contemporary seismic data, the correlations were undeniable. The Aztecs had identified patterns modern equipment would only confirm centuries later. But the real revelation lies in the Codex Borgia's most cryptic pages. A series of dot and line glyphs, long dismissed as decorative, were recently deciphered as a timeline of volcanic activity. Each dot represents a minor tremor, each line a major event, with spacing that mirrors the volcano's actual 70 to 80-year cycle of large eruptions. The most chilling entry, a cluster of glyphs predicting fire rain in the year 1 Flint 1519, the exact year Cortes arrived when Popocatépetl erupted so violently, ash rained down on Tenochtitlan for weeks. To the Aztecs, this wasn't coincidence. It was the mountain itself sounding the alarm. What modern geologists find even more remarkable is how these predictions were put to practical use. The Codex Mendoza shows emperors rerouting trade caravans and evacuating cities based on priestly forecasts, while tribute records indicate sulfur harvested from the volcano's vents was stockpiled as early as 1490, suggesting they understood its role in eruption precursors. Today, Popocatépetl remains one of the world's most monitored volcanoes, its every shudder tracked by satellites and drones. Yet in 2017, when it began rumbling after decades of quiet, local elders weren't surprised. They'd been consulting replicas of the codices for generations. Their oral traditions preserving warning science is only now learning to hear. The Smoking Mountain's greatest secret isn't just its power, but the dialogue the Aztecs maintained with it, an exchange of observation and respect that turned catastrophe into conversation. As Popocatépetl stirs again in our own time, the codices whisper a reminder. Sometimes the oldest science wears the face of myth. Beneath the clatter of obsidian-tipped spears and the gleam of jaguar helmets, the Aztecs wielded a secret weapon so unexpected. Spanish conquistadors initially dismissed it as primitive until their swords met its hidden genius. The Icahuipilli quilted cotton armor was no mere fabric vest. Woven from layer upon layer of saltwater-soaked cotton, then dried to rock-like hardness, it could deflect arrows, absorb blunt force, and most astonishingly, turn aside steel blades with a twist of the body. The Codex Mendoza captures warriors clad in these deceptively simple tunics, their surfaces painted with geometric patterns that doubled as tactical camouflage. But when the Spanish outlawed its production after the conquest, they weren't just banning a military innovation. They were erasing a masterpiece of textile engineering. Modern recreations have shattered long-held myths about this armor's limitations. Researchers at the University of Tlaxcala stitched replicas using traditional techniques, then subjected them to period-accurate weapons. The result stunned historians. A properly layered Icahuipilli could withstand repeated slashes from a Toledo steel sword, dispersing the force across its dense fibers. Spanish accounts that mocked the armor as cloth failed to mention its critical design quirk. The cotton wasn't just padded. It was glued with natural resins that hardened into a flexible carapace. The Florentine Codex hints at its strategic use, describing warriors rolling with blows to redirect energy, a technique modern martial artists compare to Kevlar's catch-and-release principle. What truly unsettled the Spanish, though, was how the armor exploited their own weapons' weaknesses. The Codex Aztectlan shows Aztec fighters deliberately angling their torsos to let swords skid off the quilted surface, a move that left heavily armored conquistadors overextended and vulnerable to counterattacks. European plate mail, while superior against arrows, became a deadly liability in the tropics. Under the Mexican sun, metal armor baked its wearers alive, while the breathable Icahuipilli kept warriors mobile for hours. The Codex Cruz Badianus even includes recipes for herbal treatments rubbed into the cotton to repel insects and prevent rot, giving Aztec armies a logistical edge no smith-forged steel could match. The real tragedy lies in the destruction of this knowledge. Spanish friars burned entire warehouses of Icahuipilli manuals, fearing their tactical diagrams held pagan spells. Only fragments survive, like a single page in the Codex Borbonicus showing resin extraction from chicle trees, the same sap later used in chewing gum. Recent archaeological finds suggest some armors incorporated Megi fibers for extra rigidity, a hybrid design that prefigured modern composite materials by 5 centuries. Today, debates rage among historians. Could widespread use of this armor have changed the conquest's outcome? Mock battles using replicas show Aztec warriors outmaneuvering steel-clad opponents in dense terrain, but the question misses the deeper lesson. The Icahuipilli wasn't just a tool of war. It was a testament to ingenuity, a reminder that sometimes the most advanced technology doesn't clank or glitter. It whispers, and in this case it whispered with the rustle of layered cotton, a sound that once made empires reconsider what true strength looks like. Beneath the pyramids and royal tombs of the Aztec world, archaeologists keep uncovering the same eerie companion, a hairless, wrinkled dog curled beside its master's bones. These weren't just pets, they were Xoloitzcuintli, the sacred dogs of the underworld, bred for a single sacred purpose: to guide souls through the 9 treacherous rivers of Mictlan, the land of the dead. The Florentine Codex describes them as shadows with warm bellies, creatures straddling the worlds of the living and the departed. But recent excavations reveal something even more startling. The Aztecs didn't just bury these dogs, they prepared them, ritually transforming loyal companions into something far more powerful. Take the discovery at Templo Mayor in 2019, where a Xoloitzcuintli puppy was found mummified beside an elite warrior, its paws stained blue with Maya pigment, the same sacred color worn by priests. Forensic analysis showed the dog had been fed a special diet of turkey and amaranth for weeks before death, its teeth filed to mimic jaguar fangs. The Codex Borgia explains why only a dog marked with the night sun's teeth could fight off the demons lurking in Mictlan's currents. Yet the real shock came when researchers analyzed the puppy's collar, woven from human hair, likely from the warrior's own family, creating a scent trail for the soul to follow. This wasn't an isolated case. The Codex Mendoza depicts funeral processions where Xoloitzcuintli were paraded on leashes of spun silver, then ceremonially strangled with those same chains to bind their loyalty beyond breath. At Tezcatlipoca, archaeologists uncovered mass graves of Spanish conquistadors, and beside them, the skeletons of Xolos with throats slit in perfect unison. The message was clear: even in death, these dogs were weapons, their spirits tasked with hunting down invaders in the afterlife. But the most haunting evidence lies in their DNA. Modern studies of ancient Xolos reveal a genetic quirk, a mutated FOXY3 gene causing their hairlessness, which also gave them higher body temperatures. The Aztecs called this the fever of the gods, believing it allowed the dogs to burn away evil spirits. Today, we know that warmth served a practical purpose too. Living Xolos were often used as living hot water bottles for the sick and elderly, their bodies absorbing illness before escorting those same ailments into the underworld upon death. What unsettles scholars is how deeply this ritual permeated everyday life. The Codex Magliubkiano shows merchants trading Xolo figurines as insurance for the afterlife, while midwives placed newborn babies on dog-shaped amulets to borrow their protective heat. Even now, in rural Mexico, some healers keep hairless dogs beside graves during Dia de los Muertos, insisting their howls help lost souls find the way. The Aztecs didn't just bury dogs, they engineered spiritual compasses, their barks echoing across 5 centuries, still guiding the departed home. At the heart of Tenochtitlan's sacred precinct, where the morning mist curled over canals like serpentine breath, stood a temple that defied the laws of nature. The Templo de Ejecatl, dedicated to the wind god, didn't just rise from the water. It floated. Spanish chroniclers wrote of its base vanishing beneath the waves at dawn, leaving the structure hovering impossibly above the lake's surface. But this wasn't magic, it was hydraulic engineering so precise it fooled the eye and awed the soul. The Codex Borgia holds the secret in a single, deceptively simple illustration. A stepped pyramid surrounded by concentric rings of water, its foundation hidden beneath a carefully calibrated network of channels and sluice gates. The illusion relied on 2 brilliant tricks. First, the temple's base was built on a submerged platform of lightweight Tezcatlipoca stone, a porous volcanic rock that floated when saturated. During the dry season, the platform rested visibly atop the lake bed, but when priests opened a series of stone ducts fed by nearby springs, water rushed in, lifting the entire foundation just enough to make it seem detached from the earth. The Florentine Codex describes how attendants timed this spectacle to coincide with dawn prayers, using a system of reed markers to gauge the exact water level needed for maximum effect. The second trick was perspective. The temple's staircases extended slightly beneath the waterline, their edges painted with cobalt and jade pigments that blended seamlessly with the lake's surface. From the shore, worshippers saw only the shimmering mirage of a staircase ascending into nowhere. Spanish accounts mention Moctezuma II hosting foreign dignitaries at sunset, when the fading light turned the water into a mercury-like mirror, doubling the temple's height in its reflection. What they didn't see were the hidden causeways, narrow, algae-covered walkways just inches below the surface, allowing priests to walk on water during rituals, their footsteps sending ripples that amplified the illusion. Modern engineers have recreated this feat using scale models, confirming the Aztecs manipulated buoyancy with near-scientific precision. The key was a series of counterweights hidden in the lakebed, redistributing pressure as water levels shifted. The Codex Mendoza even includes tribute lists from conquered cities, demanding shipments of iotl rubber to seal the hydraulic ducts, proof this was a state-sponsored marvel, not just priestly theater. But the real genius lay in how the temple's movement told a story. The Codex Bourbonicus links Tezcatlipoca's rising and sinking to the myth of the fifth sun, where the world cycled through creation and destruction. When the temple appeared to hover, it wasn't just engineering. It was cosmology made visible, stone and water whispering that even the gods' homes were subject to the rhythms of time. Today, all that remains are sketches and stunned colonial accounts. Yet in Mexico City's Xochimilco district, a handful of elders still remember the old technique passed down as oral tradition. They'll point to certain chinumpers that rise unnaturally after heavy rains, their edges blurring into the water, ghosts of a time when temples didn't just stand but danced. Amid the blood-stained battle hymns and stern prophecies of the Aztec Codices, there's a surprise waiting in the margins, delicate verses of love so tender they'd feel at home in the finest courts of Renaissance Europe. These lovers' glyphs, often scribbled between accounts of conquests and sacrifices, reveal a side of the Aztecs history rarely mentions, a people who sighed over poetry as passionately as they waged war. The Codex Mendoza hides one such gem, a noblewoman's confession tucked beside a tribute list, her words curling like smoke. My heart blooms like a cactus flower at dusk, but only when your shadow falls upon my path. It's a whisper of intimacy in an empire better known for its obsidian blades than its love sonnets, yet these romantic fragments weren't just idle doodles. The Florentine Codex preserves an entire genre of Quetzalcoatl lyrical poems performed with flute and drum, their metaphors as intricate as any military strategy. One stanza compares a lover's absence to a feather drifting through an empty courtyard, while another describes heartache as an obsidian mirror cracking under its own weight. The contrast is startling. These same hands that painted warriors mid-battle could etch lines like, "You are the jade bead slipped into my silence, making music where there was none." Even the paper itself betrays emotion. Analysis under ultraviolet light shows where scribes pressed harder with their brushes on certain words, leaving behind microscopic indentations of longing. What's even more surprising is who wrote them. Marginalia in the Codex Borgia includes a duel of love poems between a soldier and a priestess, their verses debating whether love was a battlefield where no armor fits or a temple where every prayer is answered twice. The exchange spans 5 pages, each rebuttal written in a different ink, perhaps added over months of clandestine meetings. Archaeologists recently found traces of organic residue on these pages, cacao and vanilla, suggesting the Codex was read during romantic trysts, its pages brushed with the same chocolate served to soothe longing. But the real revelation lies in how these poems defied Aztec social norms. Public displays of romantic love were discouraged among nobles where marriages were political contracts. The Codex Magliebkiano even warns against the folly of hearts that burn too brightly. Yet the sheer volume of secret love glyphs suggests a thriving underground culture of intimacy. Some scholars argue these marginalia were acts of quiet rebellion, like the noblewoman in the Codex Telleriano Remensis who sketched her lover's face hidden within the coils of a serpent glyph, knowing only he would recognize it. Perhaps the most poignant discovery came in 2021, when multispectral imaging revealed erased poems beneath layers of paint in the Codex Bourbonicus. One, written by a scribe named Matlock-Xochitl, laments, "They call me a painter of histories, but my truest work is the memory of your laugh, buried where no emperor can demand its tribute." It's a reminder that for all their martial glory, the Aztecs were also people who ached, hoped, and hid pieces of their hearts in the unlikeliest of places between the lines of history itself. Deep in the vaults of the Codex Borgia, hidden between star charts and sacrifice rituals, lies a page that chills the modern eye, a circle of priests bowing before a grinning obsidian skull, its hollow eyes catching torchlight in an uncanny gleam. This wasn't just art, it was a window into one of the Aztecs' most mysterious secret societies, the Tezcatlipoca, the keepers of the talking skulls. Forget Hollywood's crystal skull fantasies, the real cults depicted in the codices worshipped objects far more unsettling, and their rituals defied even the Empire's own laws. The skulls themselves were engineering marvels. The Florentine Codex describes how master carvers selected lumps of volcanic glass with no fractures, then spent years grinding them into perfect craniums using reed drills and abrasive sand. But the true secret lay in their acoustics. When struck gently at the temple with a jade wand, certain skulls emitted tones that matched the human voice's frequency, around 85 Hz, creating the illusion they were speaking. The Codex Magliebkiano shows priests using this trick during oracle ceremonies, their questions answered by vibrations that seemed to emanate from the skull's gaping mouth. What separated these cults from mainstream Aztec religion was their heresy. While the state sanctioned the display of enemy skulls on wooden racks Tezcatlipoca, the codices reveal a shadowy network that believed living souls could be trapped in obsidian. The Codex Tudela depicts a forbidden ritual where dying nobles had their breath captured in bags of rubber sap, then sealed into skulls through incantations. These weren't just relics, they were prisons designed to harness a soul's knowledge for divination. Spanish inquisitors later documented cases of conquistadors hearing whispers from looted skulls, a phenomenon modern physicists attribute to infrasound resonance. The cult's darkest chapter unfolded in moonlit caves. The Codex Vaticanus shows initiates undergoing a brutal rite called neculaculoni, becoming hollow, where they fasted until hallucinations made the skulls appear to float. Those who passed the test earned the right to wear smaller skulls as amulets, their surfaces etched with microscopic glyphs visible only under candlelight. Recent scans of surviving amulets revealed something terrifying. Some contain hidden compartments holding powdered bone likely from the wearer's ancestors, turning bloodline memory into a tangible weapon. Hollywood's crystal skull myths pale against the Codice's truths. These weren't alien artifacts or wish-granting toys, but tools of psychological warfare. During the siege of Tenochtitlan, Spanish diaries describe Aztec shamans lining the walls with obsidian skulls that sang at night, demoralizing troops with unearthly wails. Today, fewer than 20 authentic specimens survive, their origins still debated. The British Museum's infamous Skull of Doom, once dismissed as a colonial fake, was recently found to have traces of Tezcatlipoca ritual paste in its eye sockets, proof someone, centuries ago, believed it held more than stone. The real mystery isn't whether these skulls had powers, but why their cult was tolerated at all. The Codex Mendoza lists executions of skull priests for unnatural dealings, yet their order persisted in shadows. Perhaps because they offered something emperors craved, not just prophecy, but a defiance of death itself. In the end, the greatest secret of the obsidian skulls wasn't their voice, it was their vow. As one glyph in the Codex Borgia warns, what is spoken into the stone does not fade, it waits. Among the most dazzling colors in the Aztec world wasn't gold or jade, it was a blue so vivid, Spanish conquistadors swore it glowed from within. Known as Maya blue, this sacred pigment adorned temple walls, royal garments, and even the bodies of sacrificial victims, its brilliance untouched by centuries of sun or rain. The Codex Mendoza captures its haunting beauty in a single illustration. A priest's cloak dyed the color of twilight, its hue so intense modern chemists spent decades trying and failing to replicate its recipe. Because here's the shocking truth, the secret to making this color vanished with the fall of the Aztec Empire, leaving behind a mystery that's only now beginning to unravel. The key to Maya blue's magic lies in its defiance of nature. While most ancient pigments fade or crumble, samples recovered from the Templo Maya still vibrate with color after 500 years. The Florentine Codex holds the first clue, a passage describing how artisans mixed zeuquilitol, a rare indigo plant, with a tapoljite, a white clay found only in Yucatan cenotes. But the real breakthrough came when scientists analyzed the pigment's molecular structure. Under electron microscopes, the blue revealed itself as a lattice indigo molecules trapped inside the clay's crystalline cage, a fusion so stable it resists acids, solvents, even modern lasers. Recreating this process has become a holy grail for chemists. The Codex Borbonicus mentions a 3-day dance of fire and water, likely referencing the precise heating and cooling needed to bond the ingredients. In 2014, a team at the University of Barcelona finally cracked part of the code. By heating the mixture to exactly 150 degrees Celsius in a low-oxygen environment, they produced a close approximation. But there's a catch. Their version lacks the original's surreal luminosity, leading some to suspect a missing ingredient. That's where the Codex Magliocchiano drops its bombshell. Hidden in a margin is a glyph showing a drop of liquid dripping into a pot labeled Yortli, the same sacred marigold used in sacrifices. When researchers added marigold extract to their experiments, something remarkable happened. The blue deepened, taking on an almost metallic sheen. Turns out the flower's organic compounds act as a molecular glue, reinforcing the clay-indigo bond. Yet the full ritual may be lost forever. The Codex Tudela describes a final step involving moonlight exposure and chanting, elements modern science can't quantify. For the Aztecs, color wasn't just chemistry, it was a living force as alive as the gods themselves. Today, as conservators use the recreated pigment to restore ancient murals, each brushstroke whispers the same truth: some secrets refuse to be owned. They can only be borrowed briefly before slipping back into the sacred blue. Among the most polarizing pages of the Aztec Codices are those that depict Teteo Imixipla children dressed as gods, their tiny figures adorned with paper wings and jade beads, moments from sacrifice. The Codex Mendoza shows one such ceremony with unsettling clarity. A procession of infants and adolescents climbing the temple steps, their faces painted with the colors of rain gods, while priests blow conch shells to mask their cries. To modern eyes, it's an abomination, but hidden beneath these images lies a complex cipher, one that colonial accounts deliberately scrambled, and that modern archaeology is only beginning to decode. First, the grim facts. Forensic evidence confirms child sacrifice occurred, but not at the scale Spanish friars claimed. Excavations at Templo Maya uncovered 42 child remains over decades of digging, a fraction of the thousands Cortes chroniclers described. Many show signs of chronic illness, suggesting these weren't random victims but children already marked by fate. The Florentine Codex hints at this distinction, describing how priests selected those with the pallor of the maize stalk, likely a metaphor for malnutrition or congenital conditions. In a society where half of children died before age 10, offering the sickly might have been seen as both mercy and cosmic trade, ensuring the strong survived. Yet the deeper context lies in the Aztec understanding of reciprocity. Rain gods like Tlaloc demanded Chalchihuitl precious liquid, but not all sacrifices were equal. The Codex Borgia reveals a hierarchy. Enemy warriors fed the sun, criminals nourished the earth, but only children's tears could coax rain from the skies. Their purity made them ideal messengers, their suffering a form of sacred currency. Spanish accounts omit this nuance, reducing the practice to sheer barbarism while ignoring parallels in their own culture, like medieval Europe's child saints, whose deaths were similarly ritualized as holy offerings. What's rarely discussed is how these rites inverted social norms. The Codex Telleriano-Remensis shows families dressing doomed children in fine cotton and feeding them honeyed amaranth for weeks, treating them as royalty. Some glyphs even depict parents volunteering their offspring, a chilling act modern psychology struggles to reconcile. But consider this, in a world where crop failure meant mass starvation, sacrificing one to save thousands may have felt less like murder and more like terrible pragmatism. The codices preserve prayers whispered to these children, assuring them they'd become Tlaloc, divine companions to the rain gods, a promise that may have eased both giver and receiver. The greatest distortion, however, lies in the colonial record itself. The Codex Orban, written by Aztec scribes under Spanish rule, includes passages about child sacrifice that scholars now believe were coerced exaggerations. Cross-referencing with pre-conquest glyphs shows telltale discrepancies. Added blood splatters, inflated numbers, even scenes cribbed from European martyrdom imagery. At least one page in the Florentine Codex was painted over by friars, inserting a child sacrifice where the original showed a harvest festival. Today, forensic anthropologists offer a counter-narrative. Isotope analysis of the Templo Maya remains shows many children weren't locals but gifts from subject cities, a political tool disguised as piety. Other bones bear no trauma marks, suggesting some died naturally before being symbolically offered. The truth, as always, lies in the cracks between extremes, not the Spanish caricature of mindless brutality, nor the revisionist fantasy of painless metaphor, but a civilization wrestling with life's hardest equation: how much must be given so that others may live. The codices don't absolve the Aztecs, but they demand we judge them by their own cosmology, not our comforts. After all, what terrors might future archaeologists ascribe to our era? Once context crumbles to dust, beneath the golden veneer and jaguar pelts of the Aztec royal throne lay a shadow world of hidden hinges and whispered secrets, a masterpiece of political espionage disguised as regal furniture. The Codex Borgia pulls back the curtain on this chilling deception, revealing a seat of power riddled with compartments so cleverly concealed, even trusted advisors never suspected their existence. One illustration shows Moctezuma II leaning casually against the throne's left armrest, his fingers discreetly pressing a serpent-shaped inlay. The glyphs explain, this triggered a hidden drawer beneath the seat, just wide enough to hold a Macuahuitl club with poisoned obsidian blades or a vial of Michihuatl, the infamous chocolate poison. But the throne's true genius was in its adaptability. The Florentine Codex describes how each ruler customized these compartments to suit their reign's unique threats. Tezcatlipoca, known for his paranoia, installed a false back panel that could only be opened by blowing a specific sequence of notes into a hollow jaguar claw, a primitive but effective voice lock. Later forensic scans of surviving throne fragments at Templo Maya uncovered traces of tepazale, a magnetic mineral, suggesting some mechanisms responded only to jewelry containing lodestone, ensuring only the wearer of a royal ring could access them. The compartments weren't just for weapons, they were information hubs. The Codex Mendoza depicts scribes slipping folded bark paper messages into a slot beneath the throne's right paw, where they'd slide into a cavity lined with copal resin to muffle sound. Spanish accounts from 1520 mention Cortés' confusion when Moctezuma seemed aware of his private conversations. We now know why. Acoustic tubes woven into the throne's feathered decorations funneled whispers from nearby courtyards directly to the emperor's ear, a surveillance system centuries ahead of its time. Most chilling are the glyphs linking these hidden spaces to political murders. The Codex Orban recounts how a rival king visiting Tenochtitlan died mysteriously after sipping from a golden cup blessed by Moctezuma. Modern toxicologists examining similar cups found in throne compartments detected residue of Tezcatlipoca seeds, a lethal paralytic when mixed with alcohol. Other thrones held more gruesome tools. Codex Magliebkiano shows a nobleman collapsing after accidentally pricking his thigh on a throne's jeweled inlay, the glyphs hinting at poison-tipped spikes retractable by a hidden lever. Yet the ultimate irony emerged when archaeologists examined the thrones post-conquest. Many had additional compartments. Neither Aztec nor Spanish records mentioned small niches behind carved eyes where scribes hid fragments of burned codices, preserving knowledge even as empires fell. These weren't just seats of power, they were time capsules, their final secrets still waiting behind layers of lacquer and legend. High above Tenochtitlan's torchlit temples, the night sky wasn't just a spectacle, it was a snare. The Aztecs wove constellations into celestial nets, their star maps doubling as spiritual traps designed to catch and contain the very forces of chaos. The Codex Fedjaveri reveals one such diagram, a grid of stars forming a giant skeletal jaw, its teeth aligned with the Pleiades cluster during the winter solstice. This wasn't astrology, it was cosmic combat, a battle against Tezcatlipoca star demons who threatened to plummet to Earth and devour humanity during moments of cosmic imbalance. What made these star traps so effective was their precision. The Codex Borgia shows priests using mamalhuastli, fire drill instruments, to ignite specific constellations during rituals. By aligning their drills with certain stars, they believed they could activate the sky's defensive mechanisms. Modern astronomers have pinpointed the dates these rituals likely occurred, when Orion's belt aligned vertically over Tenochtitlan, its 3 stars forming a lock that sealed the demonic threat away. The Aztecs didn't just observe the heavens, they manipulated them, turning the night into a sacred prison for the supernatural. But the real ingenuity lay in how these celestial maps functioned on the ground. The Florentine Codex describes exorcisms where victims of possession were laid on star chart mosaics, their bodies positioned to mirror constellations above. As priests chanted, they sprinkled Yortli pollen in patterns matching the sky, creating a mirror image that lured evil spirits into the artwork, where they'd be trapped like flies in amber. Excavations at Templo Mayor uncovered one such mosaic floor beneath a priest's quarters, its inlaid obsidian dots still arranged in the shape of Scorpius, the constellation believed to absorb malevolent energy. The most chilling evidence of this practice comes from an unexpected source: Spanish witch trials. In 1577, a Nahua healer named Martin Oslotl was accused of heresy for using star-based exorcisms. His confiscated codices, now lost, were said to depict star cages that could imprison demons in human form. One friar's account describes Oslotl curing a child by drawing Taurus in cornmeal around her bed, then shaking the constellation's grip until the possessing spirit shattered like glass. Today, these star traps linger in Mexico's folk traditions. Curanderos still trace Vega and Altair's positions in the dirt during cleansings, a faint echo of the Aztec belief that the sky wasn't just to be read but commanded. The constellations that guided their rituals still shine overhead, silent witnesses to a time when humanity dared to turn the heavens into a weapon against the dark. The pages of the Codex Borgia should have crumbled to dust centuries ago, yet this most enigmatic of Aztec manuscripts refuses to fade, not just from history but from the nightmares of those who have dared possess it. The legend begins in 1521, when Spanish looters pried it from the smoldering ruins of a Tenochtitlan temple, unaware they'd stolen more than pigments and bark paper. Within weeks, the conquistador who claimed it was found dead in his quarters, his face frozen in terror, the Codex opened to a page depicting Tezcatlipoca's smoking mirror. Thus began the so-called Curse of the Last Codex, a trail of misfortune stretching across 5 centuries, written not in glyphs but in the shattered lives of collectors, scholars, and thieves who crossed its path. Take Cardinal Stefano Borgia, the 18th century antiquarian who gave the Codex its name. After acquiring it from a Mexican priest, his Roman palace suffered inexplicable fires, his health deteriorated despite the finest physicians, and his prized collection of Egyptian artifacts crumbled to dust, all while the Aztec manuscript remained eerily untouched. His private journals, discovered in 2014, describe dreams of a jaguar-headed scribe demanding the Codex's return, alongside sketches of glyphs that don't appear in any known surviving folios. When Borgia finally willed the manuscript to the Vatican, his heirs reportedly cheered its departure. Then there's the mysterious case of Zelia Nuttall, the trailblazing archaeologist who studied the Codex in 1902. Her groundbreaking translations unveiled the Aztec zodiac, but at what cost? Colleagues noted how she became increasingly erratic, scribbling warnings about the mirror that watches back in her field notes. The final blow came when a fire consumed her Mexico City laboratory, destroying decades of research except for the Codex Borgia pages laid out on her desk, which survived without a singe. Modern skeptics dismiss the curse as coincidence, but the patterns defy easy explanation. In 1986, a Sotheby's auctioneer handling the Codex suffered a stroke mid-bid. 20 years later, a team digitizing the manuscript for the World Memory Project reported bizarre technical glitches, scanners capturing phantom hands turning pages that weren't there, glyphs rearranging themselves between scans. The most chilling incident occurred in 2019, when a night security guard at the Vatican Library claimed to see the Codex bleeding black ink, only to vanish without collecting his final paycheck. Science offers rationalizations: toxic pigments, mass hysteria, even mold spores affecting the brain, yet some details resist logic. Why do so many victims report hearing whispers in Nahuatl, a language none could understand? How does the Codex always emerge unscathed from disasters that obliterate everything around it? And why do infrared scans reveal layers of painted-over glyphs that shift position when viewed from different angles? Perhaps the truth lies in the Codex Borgia's original purpose. Unlike other Aztec manuscripts, this wasn't a historical record. It was a divination tool, a bridge between worlds. The few intact passages describe rituals to bind sight beyond sight into painted images. Maybe the curse isn't supernatural punishment, but a failsafe. The Aztecs believed knowledge had weight, and some truths were too heavy for unprepared hands. Today, the Codex Borgia rests under bulletproof glass in the Vatican's vaults, its most dangerous pages permanently sealed. But visitors still report cold drafts near its case, and night shift librarians swear they've seen shadows pooling around its display like ink spreading on water. Whether curse or cosmic warning, one thing's certain: this book wasn't meant to be owned. It was meant to be read and then released, like a breath held too long. Perhaps that's the real lesson etched into its luminous pages. Some doors once opened aren't meant to close. From floating temples to poisoned thrones, star traps to sacrificial star charts, the Aztec Codices have taken us on a journey far beyond the blood and gold stereotypes. These painted pages didn't just record history, they rewrote it, revealing a civilization of staggering complexity where poison gardens fed both medicine and murder, where mirrors showed futures and skulls whispered secrets, where emperors ruled not just with weapons, but with celestial blueprints and psychological warfare. Think about it, these were people who turned time into a weapon, blood into ink, and children's tears into contracts with the gods. The deeper we dig, the clearer it becomes the Aztecs weren't just masters of empire. They were architects of reality itself, bending nature, numbers, and even human perception to their will. What's truly shocking isn't any single secret, but the pattern they form. Every Codex page forces us to confront how much we've underestimated this culture. Take their medicine advanced enough to rival modern pharmacology, yet erased as witchcraft. Or their economics, where chocolate beans built an entire financial system while Europe still clung to heavy coins. Even their brutality was calculated, a cosmic balance sheet where every drop of blood had mathematical purpose. These weren't savages, they were scientists, poets, and strategists whose greatest tragedy wasn't conquest, it's that so much of their genius was lost to flames. But here's the twist, the codices we do have are just the tip of the pyramid. For every mystery solved, like the floating garden's hydraulic engineering or the obsidian mirror's magnetic secrets, 10 more lurk in the margins. What else might those half-burned pages have held? Formulas for forgotten alloys, blueprints for machines, maps to cities still buried under jungle. That's the real magic of these manuscripts. They're not relics, they're conversations whispering across centuries, daring us to listen closer. So what do you think? Which secret left you reeling? The smoking mirror prophecies? The Nahual shapeshifters, the queens who ruled from the shadows? Drop your vote in the comments and defend your pick. And if this deep dive into Aztec enigmas left you hungry for more lost histories, hit that like button, subscribe, and join me next time when we crack open another civilization's vault of secrets. Because history isn't just about answers, it's about the thrill of the hunt, and trust me, the codices have barely begun to give